Welcome back to another edition of Racing Rundown here on YouTube. I'm Eric DeCoster. In this Kentucky Derby profile, we'll be taking a look at Sun Thunder, Kenny McPeek's representative in this year's Kentucky Derby, a horse who has not done a whole lot on this Kentucky Derby trail, but I think when you read between the lines a little bit, there could be some intriguing qualities about him leading into this year's race. A horse who has always kind of ran a good race, but has run much better races than others because he's a very pace-dependent horse, and that's something we're certainly going to break down as we go through this Kentucky Derby profile. Sun Thunder debuted at Churchill on their Stars of Tomorrow card in late November, Thanksgiving weekend, and ran a good third. Did not break well, did not show any signs of life early on, but picked off horses nicely and was third, beaten 7.5 lengths, but he was only a neck off of second. They were well beaten by the winner that day. So it was a good run, and especially for the Ken McPeek barn, which if you're familiar with his record with first-time starters, you know it's not very good. So the fact he was able to run so strongly indicated a big move up. Second time out, he went off 6-5 that day, and he ran like it. Won by 6.5 lengths, also coming from off the pace there. And there was no pace in front of him, so I think that's something that is kind of a positive for him in that sense, but that was obviously a maiden race. Nevertheless, beat King Russell in that race, and it was about 11 lengths back to third. So dominated there, and that led to Ken McPeek vaulting him up into Stakes Company, where he would go on and run fourth in the Southwest behind Arabian Night. It was over a sloppy track, but this was the beginning of a recurring theme that we're going to touch on in 3 of the next 4 races we go through, because the pace on paper looks a little faster than it actually is. You know, he went 22-4 for the opening quarter, the speed did. Then they went 24 seconds for the second panel, 25 for the third. So it was a typical Johnny V ride there on Arabian Night, where he will blitz that first quarter, but then really bring him in for the next half mile or so. So the fractions weren't all that hot, and he was picking off some horses late. Sun Thunder was, but obviously not enough. And like I said, that'll become a theme when we get through these next few races. Well, then came the Risen Star, went off at 16-1. Not a ton on his form, the one big race, but nevertheless, he goes into that race and he runs huge. He gets the pace was pretty hot that day. The speed did not hold up in the slightest, and he got a beautiful run through inside of horses under Brian Hernandez Jr. and sifted through traffic a little bit, got through, and then only lost by a length to Angel of Empire and finished in front of 2 Phils, the eventual Jeff Ruby Stakes winner. So a very good performance there, one that led him to being 7-1 in the Louisiana Derby in his next start. But then that started the trend I'm talking about. 2 straight races where no pace was allowed in front of him for the steep closing type. Terrible. Just not what's going to work. This is a horse with a lot of talent. I was saying it earlier. He showed that in the Risen Star. He showed that in his maiden win. And you can even see how hard he's trying in these races. But when they're not backing up India, it's pretty hard to get by them when you're kind of a closer type. So he finished 5th in the Louisiana Derby, beaten 8.5 lengths by King's Barnes, Disarm, Jace's Road, and Chopper's Revenge. And then the Bluegrass was 4th behind Tapatrice Verifying in Blazing Sevens. But if you watch both those replays, every time he is gaining. He is picking up late. But those 3 horses either got first run on him or weren't backing up. That's kind of the case with Tapatrice and Verifying. They just kept going on. Blazing Sevens got first run on Sun Thunder. And the Louisiana Derby 2-back, all those horses that were in front of him, that finished in front of him, were in front of him at every call beforehand. So when you work through the fractions like he had to without anything backing up for you, that's a problem. But so you'd hope going into the Derby that'd be different, and those are extremely valid excuses, which is my first pro that he had valid excuses. He actually has much more talent, but the problem is it doesn't feel like there's going to be a lot of pace in this year's Kentucky Derby. I'd say that there's obviously things you really have to like about there's potential for things to be a little quicker, I should be saying, but quick enough to set up for a horse who needs help? I don't know. I really don't. I think that, honestly, he is one of the better closers in this year's Kentucky Derby. I'm very happy to say that because I don't think 3 of his 4 prep races accurately reflect his true ability. But I don't know if the pace is going to be enough for him at face value. He's a horse, though, I would throw on tickets for that reason. I'm kind of getting ahead of myself, right? But, we'll save it for the end because I do want to reiterate that point towards the end, and maybe you're a listener and you just wanted to skip towards the end to begin with. But, we talked about how he had the valid excuses. We talked about the huge run in the Risen Star Stakes, and like I said, he's a horse with a lot of talent, and he's going to appreciate the 10 furlongs. This is, once again, I said this in my my profile of Rocket Can. Into Mischief did a good job breaking the mold that he's more of a sprinter sire a few years ago when he threw one Kentucky Derby winner, did it again when he threw a second, and now both of his Kentucky Derby contenders in 2023 are tried and true horses who seem like they want to run all day. And Sun Thunder is absolutely that type of horse. He's got some great distance on the dam side as well that clearly embody. He just looks more like his sire, Medagliadoro, from a physical standpoint. So I think that's probably where he gets more of it than the Into Mischief, but the talent seems to come from the Into Mischief side. So he's a big, imposing type that will certainly be passing horses late regardless, and he'll appreciate the 10 frogs because it doesn't seem like he's going to stop. But when we talk about the cons, we talked about how he could improve from the prep races because he is a closer who didn't have a pace, but the negative is he's a closer because it doesn't seem like the Derby pace will be super fast. The second thing, he has proven to always be a couple of, right? I think that regardless for the excuse you can make, he's not winning enough races. And without the potential of a pace like Rich Strike had last year, he can't be the one to pick off those horses, even if he has always been a cup below, right? I think there's a few people I have seen who think this horse could be the Rich Strike type, but when you draw the race up, there's not enough of a pace for him to do that. So that's the only negative there. I don't know if a horse will go wire to wire per se, but I don't think it'll play kindly to the horses coming from 15th or back, and I think that's where he'll be. And finally, he has no stakes wins, which pretty elementary kind of statistic there, but in fact, the matter is, let's look through the winners of the Kentucky Derby in recent years. You're not going to find too many horses that didn't have a stakes win. Obviously, of course, last year's winner, Rich Strike, does fit that bill, but before that, it's stakes winner after stakes winner after stakes winner. It's few and far between. So just a horse who does have improvement to make, but I don't think that it's far off. One thing I will say, maybe not in our pros because we're only doing 3 and 3, but there is a rumor he could be adding blinkers for the Kentucky Derby. Does that sharpen him up and move him into a nicer, earlier position? That could be the case. And if that is the case, I don't think he's crazy. I really don't, because if you if you see on the PPs he's adding blinkers, which is once again Rocket Can kind of similar horse here, but if he adds blinkers, I don't know if that puts him that far off of the rest of the field because I don't know if that'll truly put more early foot into him. But if it does, he could be a lot like a Country House, for instance, who looked like a closer on paper, put in the game a little bit more early on, and ran a huge race because of it. And I could see Sun Thunder kind of being a similar type just because of the fact that he's a little bit more sharp with the blinkers on. So for that reason, I will say I am on Sun Thunder's side in this Kentucky Derby. He's not my choice, obviously, as of now, because that's not the point of this, but I would not throw him out if I were you handicapping this race initially, because he's a nice horse who, if you add to blinkers especially, it feels like he could be a little sharper. And regardless, he has more talent than the form shows, and he's certainly one I will be using in my exotics going forward, because I think he has the ability to do those types of things. So, like I said, do not toss this horse at your own risk. I know we try to stay unbiased, but I feel like this horse I need to make a little bit more of an exaggerated case for, because I think people will look at, fourth, fifth, second, fourth. He clearly doesn't have that winning heart in him. I don't know if that's entirely the case. So something to consider when you're handicapping the Kentucky Derby, maybe looking for a live long shot. I would not say Sun Thunder, is a horse that you should look too far beyond. With that, that's all I have on this edition of our Kentucky Derby Profile Series Sun Thunder. Maybe a long shot you take seriously. We'll see you next time here on Racing Rundown.